Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Child Anxiety FAQ podcast. FAQ stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and I'm answering listener-submitted questions about child and teen anxiety. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I have been working with kids and families for more than half my life now as a preschool teacher, a school-age site director, family case manager, parent educator, clinical counselor, and now is the owner and operator of Child Anxiety Support for parents of anxious kids. This week's question is, what are some effective strategies to help my anxious child when they engage in negative self-talk? And this question came after I posted another podcast episode about how kids will often talk negatively about themselves when they're feeling anxious. This person has an older child. This child, I think they said they were either 12 or 13 or 12 going on 13. And we went back and forth a little bit. So their child is evidencing some lower feelings about themselves. Middle school is tough. They're just feeling lousy. They're dealing with some social anxiety. Middle school is a tough time. I think I have mentioned before that I get calls for kids who are 5. I get a lot of calls about 5-year-olds, a lot of emails about 5-year-olds, kids going into kindergarten. And that is generally because kindergarten has a lot more demands than preschool daycare, than pre-K. And we see kids' anxiety go up at around that age. I get a lot of calls about 8-year-old boys and 9-year-old girls. And I think those tween years, just things get a little more complicated. I also think that there's some behaviors that people go, I think my kid is supposed to be growing out of this now. Why aren't they? And then lots of calls about middle schoolers because middle school brings out a lot of social anxiety, even for kids without anxiety. Back to kids with a lot of negative self-talk. For this episode, I'm specifically going to be talking about kids who are tweens, early teens. Their negative self-talk is amping up. Their self-concept seems to be becoming more negative. Their self-esteem is dropping. Let's talk about that in the context of these anxious kids. First of all, the thing to know is that it is a feature of heading into middle school or junior high. This is a really tough age. Kids are starting to become more peer-oriented, and the peer expectations are shifting. You'll see a lot of changes in relationships as kids grow out of each other. Kids are trying on different identities. Kids are picking on each other because they're so insecure that their way of trying to build up their security is to say, well, at least I'm not you. So there's a lot of teasing that comes out in middle school as people go, well, I'm not you. I'm going to align with this other thing. And then I'm going to put down everybody who is not in alignment because I'm so insecure about what I've chosen to align with. We see a lot of bullying amp up in middle school. And again, this is not okay. It's not appropriate. And yet our kids are going to have to navigate it. It's just a tough time. And for parents who maybe had a tough time also in middle school, this can be a very triggering time. When our kids are struggling, we remember our struggles. When they're having a difficult time with a friend or an enemy, we remember our own difficult times with friends and enemies. And it becomes a really difficult period of parenting to navigate, which means we are also much more vulnerable to those parenting pitfalls. Remember that the parenting pitfalls are when we are trying to help our child by protecting them from the things that make them anxious, and instead what we end up doing is perpetuating their anxiety by not giving them the opportunity to learn how to manage those anxious feelings and deal with those anxious events. What this might look like is if you have a child who is struggling with a friend, you might rush to rescue them from that friendship. The kind of thing I'm talking about is, let's say a friend is being really difficult. We might intervene by calling that friend's parent. We might tell our child they should say this or they should say that. We might try to manage the conversation. We might limit their ability to interact with that person. There are things we might do that sort of take over the situation for our child when really what they're needing is for us to come alongside them and sort of help carry them through it. This can also be difficult if we don't really know what to do with these kinds of difficult friendships, and we might coach our child to do something that maybe is not the healthiest response because we are projecting our own experiences and fears and worries on them. This might be a parent who says, I don't think you should ever talk to her again because she really crossed a line, instead of helping our child to figure out what their boundaries are going to be. That means that our children need room to make mistakes. They need room to maybe give too much to a relationship, too little to a relationship. They need room to figure it out. But they also need the information that this is legitimately a difficult stage of growing. I think it's really important to tell kids this is what is going on for you and your peers developmentally, and this is what that can look like. You know how I mentioned earlier that a lot of kids start saying, I'm not you, I'm this, that's dumb, and I'm not dumb, I'm not doing this, so that bullying and criticism amps up. When I'm working with the kid this age, I let them know that is something that happens in middle school. We can expect people to not be as nice as they might have been a year ago. That's because they are trying to figure this out. So I tell kids that is typical. Again, that does not mean it's okay, but it also means it's not personal. Even though it feels personal, even though the insults or the meanness is directed personally at us, we can offer them the lens of this is happening developmentally for that person, and you don't have to take it on. So if that person says, I can't believe you're wearing socks like that, only losers wear socks like that, we can say, oh, that was a really mean thing to say. And the reason the person is being mean like this is their own insecurity, which does not mean you need to put up with it. But just so you know, this is their insecurity and actually has nothing to do with you and your socks. You get to decide whatever socks you're going to wear, because we do want to raise children who are able to manage relationships with people who are not always great, who are not always nice, who don't grow out of that. And that's what that coaching is. Does that make sense? I always like to quote RuPaul to them, who said, what other people think of me is none of my business. I think other people have said that too. But the first time I heard that quoted, it was RuPaul. So that's true. What other people think of them is none of their business. How other people treat them is their business, but they also have no control over how other people treat them. They only know how they can react. And that is the goal often with middle school. The thing too about this age is that the academic stuff really revs up. They're getting ready for high school, but I want you to remember that it's also a free time in some ways, because it's not high school. It's not going to go on those transcripts for college. And so if your child is focused more on learning to deal with anxiety, learning to deal with relationships, learning how to show up and be themselves, their grades might suffer a little bit. Try not to worry too much about that. Back to some strategies to help your child with the negative self-talk. Part of that, as I said, is to remind them this is an almost universal experience. I don't know anybody on the planet who says the best year of my life was when I was 12 or 13. It is legitimately a difficult time, and you can let them know that. This is a difficult time. It is going to get better. You're going to get through this time, and it's going to get better. The other thing with the negative self-talk is I always tell kids, I tell myself, I tell everybody, that's a feeling, not a fact. You can feel like you're ugly. You can feel like you're terrible. You can feel like you're dumb. It's not a fact. It's a feeling. Feelings deserve care for sure, but just because you feel that way does not mean it is true. It is a feeling, not a fact. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think it is perfectly okay at this age to really focus on whatever your kid is getting right. Again, parents' anxieties really rev up in this time. And so kids will say, I feel ugly. And parent will go, they feel ugly. Hey, how about I get you a new haircut or a new outfit? Well, that's kind of sending the message that that feeling is a fact and it needs to be fixed. So let's make sure we're not doing that. We're not trying to fix their feeling by, you feel stupid, how about we get you a tutor kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy your kid new clothes and you shouldn't get him a tutor. I'm saying think about the context you are offering those things. The thing you might want to say is, well, lots of kids feel ugly in middle school. It is part of it. And I would again explain to them, lots of us feel ugly when we're going through the stage. Your body is growing like crazy and it's changing. And so you don't know how it works anymore. I can remember that, can't you? Where you'd be like, this shirt is super cute. And then one day you put on your favorite shirt and go, it does not look like the way I meant it to look like. Whose body am I having right now? What the heck is going on? Let them know that is part of being in middle school. Your body is changing really quickly and it can feel like you don't know it anymore. So you might not know how to dress it, or you might feel like I'm a rainbow, shiny, smiley, fun person today. Wait, no, I'm a dark goth person tomorrow. Children this age are trying on different identities. We can expect them to have a clothes crisis every morning as they try to figure out, what do I like to wear? What's comfortable in this new weird body? How do I fit in with other kids? Do I even want to fit in with other kids? Let them know trying on identities is part of what's happening that feels uncomfortable. And so often we will criticize ourselves, who we are, when really what's happening is we are uncomfortable. So when they have that negative self-talk, you can tell them you are growing really quickly. Things don't seem to make sense. And we tend to root that in ourselves. Something's wrong with me, when really you're going through a transition and that feels like yuck. You can also remind them that when they were younger and going through transitions, that was hard too. You can share stories with them. You can say, listen, when you were teething, boy, you struggled to sleep and you cried a lot because that was a big transition. You're going through a rough transition now, but I am going to be here with you. You're going to see it through. You're not always going to feel this awkward and weird, etc. If you have a child who likes to read, there are lots of great fiction books about kids going through adolescence in tricky, uncomfortable ways. And that can be a reminder of this is a universal experience. This is really, really, really important. When we are suffering and in pain, we tend to be selfish and self-centered. It makes sense. When we're struggling, we need all those resources to get through our struggle. We can be the people that can remind them, you feel like the only person on the planet who woke up this morning and felt like junk, but actually that is part of being human, is sometimes we wake up and we feel like junk. You're not the only person who feels like you have nothing but bad hair days. You are not the only person who never knows what to wear and thinks your feet are the wrong size and your body's the wrong shape and all of those things. Again, sometimes this is how it feels to be human. You are not alone. The big thing, again, is not to get sucked into your child's feelings of struggle and negative self-worth, and instead be with them and hold their hand through it. Now, in my program, specifically Resiliency Sprint, we dig into this a little more. If you would like to join it, you can go to my site and see how to sign up. And then I can coach you specifically in your child at this age, in their context, in your context, what's happening for you, what's making it difficult for you to find ways to support them, or if you're needing new ways, by all means, reach out. A tough age for kids means a tough age for parents too. And so you also deserve your support. If you have a question you'd like me to answer on the show, please go to childanxietysupport.com/podcast and submit it there, and maybe I'll answer it on the next episode. Thanks.